Good. I'll start because we have limited time. My name is Pastor Donovan Price, Dr. Donovan Price, Pookie, Riri, Nene, whatever you want to call me. That's not important. I'm the victim advocate here in Chicago. There are a bunch of victim advocates here in Chicago, but I am the victim advocate here in Chicago, just in case you didn't know. I have an organization called Solutions and Resources / Street Pastors. Street Pastors is actually an organization that began in London, and I brought it to America, and I'm the only one in America right now, but hopefully that'll change one day. But I've been saying that since 2016 when I started this, and God gave me the vision to help the victims of homicides and shootings in Chicago. As for me, when there's a homicide or shooting in Chicago, generally speaking, I get there about 20 minutes after shots fired. 20 minutes after shots fired is about the time, I leave about the time that the ambulance does, or within 5 minutes of the time that the ambulance does, and I get there at 20 minutes. I do the entire city and the suburbs, depending upon the scene. I have a priority system that I use personally for the scenes. One is children. If it's a child shot, then I'm automatically kind of going to mobilize a little bit. Also with that, hey, what's happening, man? How are you? Also, after a child, I have mass shootings. Mass shooting is defined as 4 or more people who've been shot. This week, starting Sunday, we had 3 mass shootings in 2 days. One was, I believe, close to 7 people totally involved. I responded to all 3 mass shootings. One shooting was on the north side and 2 were on the south side. After I arrive at the scene, I work with the family there and the police there and everybody who's there at the scene. When that mother comes running down the street, then I make it my priority to be there, to catch that mother, to deal with that mother. During the 2 or 3 hours she's there till the body is removed. Also the police department there, helping them deal with the family, because we know sometimes police can get involved in their job and miss some of the aspects necessary to care for somebody in that particular type of stressful situation. So I help them realize that they both need each other. If I'm speaking kind of fast, feel free to slow me down, but this is a 3-hour-long class that I'm doing in this 30 minutes. And so I'm going to be speaking very fast, so don't worry about it. No, just joking. At that scene, like I said, it lasts about 3 hours till body removal. So it's quite a large amount of time. I help the family to get to the police department for answers, to answer their questions. I also help the police department find out who in the family that they need to talk to, because there's a give and take there. And I'm going to go through everything that's at a crime scene in a moment. That way, when it happens in your area, whether it's your home, whether it's your church, whatever the case may be, you'll at least know when you step outside your door or the door you're at, you'll know what you see immediately. Once I leave that crime scene, the next morning, generally within 24 hours, the next of kin, the next 2 people of kin have to go identify the body at the Cook County Medical Examiner's office or the morgue. I escort them, generally speaking, to the morgue, and one of the few people, probably about 2 people, maybe 3 tops, who is allowed to identify the body with the family. So I actually try to stay there and hold the mother's hand while she identifies her child, or whatever the case may be, the father or the grandmother, whatever the case may be. After then, help them organize or raise money for resources for the memorial or the funeral, which can be the Attorney General's office. This is an important point. The Attorney General office has a victim compensation form. That's the most widely used form in terms of helping with the families to coordinate funds for their funeral. It actually does a lot more than that. I'll go into that if we have time later. But that's one of the most important things that you can do for somebody in particular. And it's a good starting point that anybody can do. And that's helped them get a hold of that Attorney General form for victim compensation that can help them with some money for the funeral, help them with some money for lost wages, for trauma care, for whatever they might need at that time. And that can be found online at the Attorney General's office. Victims, all you had to do is see victims compensation, and that'll take care of that. After I leave them, guide them through the funeral process, the homegoing process, the memorial process, then I usually wait about 2 weeks or a week and a half or so, circle back around and help them with resources for their family in general. A lot of times with homicides and with shootings, you'll find that the family, if you were able to rewind the clock, you would find, unfortunately, that you can kind of see that type of thing coming. And so you really want to take a certain level of time to guide them toward resources for that entire household. Now that entire household is going to include, generally speaking, a lot of people. And some people who you may not think should be in this equation, but they are in this equation if they live in this household. My most recent family that I worked with was a mom who lost her second son to gun violence. For me, it was a first. I don't run into too many firsts, but unfortunately, this was a first situation in that it was the, come on in, make yourself at home. For me, it was an unfortunate situation to have this first because this was the second time I had taken this mom to the morgue. This was her second child, second son, who unfortunately had been shot and killed, and he was shot and killed at 19 years old, 20 years old, at one of the 3 mass shootings that we had last week. And then after I helped them within that couple of weeks from the unfortunate incident, then I circle back around again, and I work with them the rest of their lives on whatever they need. They can call me and ask for a gallon of milk 5 years later, and I've done that, and that's happened. I actually worked with one family for a 5-year period until every single person in that household had been shot and killed. It started with a little girl who was 6 years old who actually didn't get killed but was shot, and then worked with the entire family over a period of 5 years. And unfortunately, the last 2 people were lost to gun violence in that. And so what I'm gonna do first and foremost, they told me that because this was a long presentation, that I should stretch it out over the three building blocks, but then I'm gonna forget where I was, and that's gonna cause a whole bunch of problems and everybody's gonna be confused. Plus, it does help though to make sure you come back for part 2, kind of like one of those TV shows we all love. But first we're gonna start off with all the things that you might see at a scene. We're starting out with victim advocate and crisis intervention. One of the things that I liked, and the reason that I brought this up, was because the two are slightly different. Crisis intervention can extend past a homicide scene. It can actually exist in a community regularly, all the time. It can lead to conflict resolution. It can lead to working with a family that's having problems, whatever the case may be. It can lead to street gang outreach or street outreach or whatever a person may need, whatever a community may need. And so if you're going to do this in your churches, you're going to do this in your organization, whatever the case may be, you might want to consider crisis intervention, which also leads to violence reduction and that type of thing. Where the victim advocate is always going to come from a victim. Makes sense, right? It's okay to say, yeah, I am a Baptist preacher, and therefore kind of like to hear that extra amen or whatever the case may be, a nod or a collection. Or collection, I had to throw that in there. A victim advocate is somebody who advocates, who takes the place of, who helps stand in the stead of a victim after an unfortunate event like a homicide or a shooting. A shooting is a act of violence that does not necessarily involve death, where a homicide is, generally speaking, an intentional shooting and murder of an individual. And so I act as a victim advocate meaning whatever they need, it's my job to help make it happen. Whatever they can't say, give them a voice because their voice has been silenced, their voice has been weakened, or whatever the case may be. In studying this situation, one of the things I came up with, which is one of the things, if you don't remember anything else about the logistics of a crime scene, is the event and the crime principle. The event versus the crime principle means that everybody is there for two reasons. Everybody who is on a crime scene boils down to two reasons. Those two reasons are the event or the crime or the victim. Everybody, including the first responders, who are generally there for the event. There was a shooting. There was a homicide. They may not know who the person is. In most cases, they don't know the actual victim. They're there for the event. Your church, your community may know the victim, may not know the victim, may know one of the victims, but not all of the victims. Whatever the case may be, it separates from the event to the victim. Now, your care, your level of care, your level of action actually changes as a result of the event or the victim itself. If it's the event, then that's a little wider scope. And for a church or for an organization, the event is probably going to be where you move at. When an event happens, a violent event, if that's a shooting, the violent event is a homicide, it's a stabbing, it's a suicide, whatever the case may be, you have a wide array of people. We're going to go into the crime scene population in a bit, but you want to remember those two things. Generally speaking, someone is there for either the event or the victim. Those who know the victim, generally speaking, are going to be a little more detailed in their need, their level of need at a scene, because they know the person who has passed on. One thing about that also separates is the fact that the people that are there for the event, it lasts as long as the tape is up, generally speaking. The crime scene tape, which I'll go into in a bit, as long as that happens, generally the event goes on, and that's for that evening. However, the victim, if the victim is dead on scene and was declared on scene, then that's when you have the 3 or 4 hour period I spoke about before body removal. Also, that may be broken up if the person was shot and they took them to the hospital. Then the hospital becomes, in a sense, another scene. And generally speaking, I found that, I remember once I went to a scene and then went to a hospital. This was my first time I think I had gone to Stroger Hospital, or as many call it, Cook County Hospital. And when I got there, I found close to 50 people standing outside the emergency room. It was shocking to me that there were that many people, but there are about 50 people out there at Stroger's emergency room. They have 3 ambulance bays there. And as I began to stay longer and longer, I ended up staying till about 4 or 5 in the morning, just because I was working with one particular family and we had to wait for the young man to get out of surgery, the young boy to get out of surgery. But what happens was, ambulance comes in with victim. Family comes in, friends come in behind that. The person goes into the hospital, they either have surgery, they either are going to be okay, or they're declared dead. At that time, the crowd starts to move out. Then another ambulance comes in to the second ambulance bay, and all throughout the night, that same kind of rotation happens. Ambulance, family, group, friends, they move out, and with 3 ambulance bays, as Stroger Hospital has, then it really becomes an issue to have all these family members, 30, 40, 50 family members from different families. Now, the only other time that I ran into a situation like that, sometimes when you have mass shootings and people are declared dead on scene and you have more than one person there, now you have multiple families on that particular scene, And there becomes a whole different level of need for each family. And so generally speaking, that's when I would say care and love more than anything. Not necessarily worried about the details of the situation, but if somebody's there, they're there for a reason. One thing also I'll bring up, because I'm kind of intermingling crime scene population and crime scene logistics, is the fact that there are several different types of reasons that a person could be there. As I said, there are those who are there for the event, and there are those who are there for the victim. Those who are there for the event is a wide array of people. You could have the people from your church who are there, who are perhaps having a service, who are perhaps having choir rehearsal, whatever the case may be, and then there was a shooting, and now they've come out of the church, just as the people have come out of their houses, the people have come out of their businesses, or perhaps the shooting happened in front of their business. Do you kind of see how this thing can splinter off into all kinds of levels of service, all kinds of service levels of need? Also, the details of the level of need, I found is very important not to forget how deep this situation. There was a shooting and or a homicide. You know how if there was a shooting in front of your house or a homicide in front of your house, how you would feel. I've always said this to be true. Your church should act as another house on that block. Your church is another house on that block. And what I mean by that is everything that Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. McCormick and Mr. Evans are concerned about, your church should be concerned about. One of the problems we have in churches is the fact that most of the people now in the church, especially if that church has been around for a while, no longer live in that community. And so if that's the case, what I suggest is what's called a church liaison, a church neighborhood liaison. That's somebody who hopefully you can find that still lives in that community, that can keep track of everything that's going on in the community to the best of their ability, so that they can communicate with the deacons, communicate with the pastor, communicate with the trustees, communicate with somebody that there was a shooting in front of the church. There's nothing more exasperating for perhaps a first responder like myself or whatever the case may be when you have a shooting or response in front of a church and that church is padlocked and it's a Monday, which probably means that that church is going to be padlocked again till next Sunday. And the church doesn't want that because it affects the church. Because if you've had a homicide or a shooting in front of a church, then I think that you all should know that for next Sunday, because there may be ramifications or repercussions as a result of that shooting, which now will affect your church as you all move in and out. So it's important that the church becomes and realizes that the concerns of the neighborhood are the concerns of the church. If there's a shooting in the neighborhood, there's a shooting in the church area. And the churches, as I said, the level of need that the neighborhood has, the church should always meet that in the first place. And so as a result of a violent or unfortunate incident, the church needs to change their level of need. Perhaps even going so far as to, I had a church one time that had a shooting during Sunday morning service across the street. Everybody from that church emptied out and came and helped that family. Church service was now in the street. Church service was now in front of that home. You see how it can move and change and the level of need of your of the community around your church. And I think that there's no better way of discipleship than to bring folks in as a result at their level of need. And some of those folks may have seen the church, but never went to the church, never stepped inside the church, simply because there was not a need. Now you have a need. Now you have an opportunity to exhibit the love of Christ in the most unfortunate of circumstances. Now let's talk about businesses. Businesses are one of those affected by the event itself. I've always said that if there's one person that's forgot when there's a shooting, it's the little teenager who works at the cashier at the Jack's Fish or whatever the case may be. She might be one of the forgotten people The people who were standing at the bus stop just so happened to be standing at the bus stop. The person who gets off of the bus to go home and now can't go home because there's tape, crime scene tape that they can't cross. And in a lot of cases, they may not be able to go home. They may actually have to wait. The people who parked there to see their aunt, to see their grandmother, now there's a shooting which had nothing to do with them or their family, but now they can't move their car. And as I said, if there's a multiple shooting or whatever the case may be, that number might increase. If it's a holiday, which is unfortunately a time when a lot of shootings happen, then there are multiple people. Wouldn't it be great if the church could open their doors and have some of these people come in? Do you see how it kind of connects? And it's important. Crime scene timeline. What I'm going to talk about now is basically how that works. Okay, pow, pow, pow. There's an unfortunate shooting that takes place. Two things happen at that shooting. People call, hopefully, to call the police, call 911. And then there's ShotSpotter. We've heard a lot about ShotSpotter recently. That ShotSpotter is necessary, not necessary, whatever the case may be. However, here's a little information that you all will have about ShotSpotter that not a lot of people know. ShotSpotter, number one, is how I respond, generally speaking. It perks up my ears to a certain degree, because when there's 20 shots fired, then we know that we might need to look out, we might need to check. ShotSpotter says, shooting, 79th and Morgan, 20 shots. It triangulates. Shooting, 7948 South Morgan on the side of the house. It's that detailed. And then the police, when they come, they kind of know where to look out, where to go and where to look out. That's important, especially because I've had people stand up in some of the hearings and some of the different conversations that say, when I hear gunshots, and some of you all might know, because there are so many gunshots nowadays, when I hear gunshots, I don't even call the police. I just move away from the window. If that's one of the situations, then we understand how there's a need for something else that will help with the gunshots. So you have gunshots. You have a response to those gunshots by first responders. First responders being the police department and medical personnel, the ambulance and the fire department, generally speaking, who roll together and they come. At that time, when the police come, they begin securing the area. A lot of times people and families and others think that when the police come, they should immediately take a look around and go looking for whoever did this crime. It's very important to secure the area, because that's the beginning of a series of things that are going to start happening. And so they usually will tape off the area, which I'll go into in a little while what the tape means, because there's a lot going around that's not true about the tape. But generally speaking, when they tape off the area, it's so that people don't go walking through the crime scene, kicking evidence, shell casings, those type of things, whatever the case may be. And so they tape off that particular area. And that area, when it's taped, then that becomes a barrier, but then it also becomes what I call both sides. Both sides mean you got the police, you got the people on this side, and now you have all the other people on that side who can't cross. And so when that family comes, when that mother comes running down the street, I don't care if she's the mother, I don't care if it's the twin brother, I don't care, whatever the case may be, they cannot cross that tape. And so can you imagine a mother who's heard already that her child's been shot, and now when she gets there, the child is right there, but she has to stop right here and can't go any further. So now the level of emotion, the level of everything has increased simply because now things aren't working as planned. So now the service area, and when I say the service area, that's the area where you come in. That's the area where you come in. And one of the reasons why I want to mention too, one of the reasons why I even decided to start doing these classes, I first taught it to some professors at Moody Bible, but one of the reasons we even put it together is so people would have some knowledge, because it's important, because good intentions are not allowed across the tape. Just because I'm pastor such and such, I really just want to help. With all my heart and soul, I want to help. Unfortunately, the law is the law. The situation is the situation. The process is the process. But there are plenty of people to help. One thing you'll find if you've been to a shooting scene, or you will find otherwise, is that generally speaking, on the south side and the west sides in particular, when there's a shooting on the block, the folks are still on the front porch. The children are still playing. I remember I did a scene at Parkway Gardens on the south side. It was a warm day. There were two bodies laying in the middle of King Drive. Two bodies laying in the middle. There's a giant fence there if you've ever seen Parkway. And the children were still playing. The families were still out and everything. And so there's a lot of trauma. Imagine the trauma of a community that sees that constantly. The children who now believe that that's the way things should be. And these are things, no matter what we totally get through, these are things you need to know. And one of those things is if you're in an area where shootings and homicide occur, the level of trauma that's just simply adding up. And we all have that. Because I know for myself, if I get on the Dan Ryan Expressway and traffic ties up in the middle of the day and it should not be tied up, oh my goodness, was there a shooting? Yesterday, we had a shooting. I had just taken that mom to the morgue, and there was a shooting on the highway. Just going from, because once that shooting happens, then now that highway, that expressway is a crime scene. So all traffic is stopped. Exits are blocked and it's stopped. Doesn't become slower like a crash or something like that and there's one lane open. Stopped, period. And this one was started, I think, in the afternoon around 11 or right around noon and lasted till rush hour. So traffic was, as you could imagine, from one end of the city to the other, which causes the side streets to get backed up and everything. And I'm telling you some of these details because it's the churches and the neighborhood stakeholders, or I'll say this, and it's okay, I hope the pastor doesn't mind, anybody who gives a damn. Because in this situation, there's too many folks who don't. Too many folks who are scared for their safety. And I remember one time before I always laugh to myself about it and look up at God. I remember saying this before I got this calling, is that in order to make a difference, somebody's going to have to run toward the gunshots. I didn't know it was going to be me, but I remember saying that. And so the crime scene is set up with tape, yellow and red tape, which I can go into that now because we're kind of squishing things together. Yellow tape is to cordon off the entire crime scene, the barrier of the crime scene, the entire area. And sometimes that's even moved back as more people come, and as the scene, they want the scene even clearer, then they'll move the tape. They do that a lot for press. They do that if it gets too tumultuous at the scene, because as family members show up, it gets, the temperature, as I call it, gets hotter and hotter. When that mom shows up and those brothers show up and those cousins show up and those people who come out of their houses, one thing you have to note also is, oh, really? Okay, that's good. 5 minutes left. Okay, I dig that. This person just got shot and now it's 5 minutes left. When those people start to come out, notice those people who come out in particular, and this is very dear to me, seniors. because seniors are perhaps the only people who now feel trapped in their homes. Most of the time when I see an elderly woman, she doesn't even come fully out of the house. She has 1 foot out of the house, 1 foot still in the door, and she's peeping out to see what's going on. And so the next day, I may come back and knock on doors. That's something that the church can really get involved in. Get a couple of people. This is a reason to knock on the door of everybody on the block and not necessarily be a Jehovah's Witness to do it. And so you knock on the doors. There was a shooting down the block. I'm sure you heard it last night, or if you didn't know, I didn't even know. I sleep during that time. I was at work during that time where there was a shooting down the block, if it had something to do with somebody on the block, if somebody died as a result of it. All of those things you need to do, and there's information. And you'll find that they ask you information about what happened. And so that's another reason on top of the other reasons why it's important for us as neighborhood stakeholders, which everyone who has a church in an area is a neighborhood stakeholder. If you're a stakeholder in the message of Christ, you're a stakeholder in the community. It says that somewhere in the Bible. Scott probably knows, or Mark. It says that in there. Scott has a great scripture that he uses when he responds out to scenes on the north side. And when I respond, I attempt to use that, but I end up texting Scott. I probably text him like 8 times to ask that same scripture, but it's in Deuteronomy. And if you want to know it, that's the guide to know. But because for the sake of time, at the beginning, as I said, police response, EMS response, followed by yellow tape, which we wrapped around the entire scene. Red tape, which is actually a lot of people think if you see red tape, somebody dead. The fact of the matter is red tape is the inner sanctum of the most important part of that crime scene. Not everybody can go into that area unless brought into that area, but detectives will definitely be there. The time period of an entire crime scene is about 3 to 4 hours. I mentioned before that until body removal. Body removal. Well, let me go through this. The police come, they cordon off the area. Around that time, an evidence tech is going to come, and detectives are start to arrive. Evidence tech is a person, if you've ever seen a crime scene or ever seen it even sometimes on TV, yes, I didn't want to refer to TV, they have a camera usually. Or you've seen those numbers that count the shell casings. That's them that do that. Count the shell casings, and they have, before then, they may be just folded business cards or whatever the case may be, but they come and make everything prepared. They'll take pictures of the body. They'll take pictures of the scene. They'll take pictures of just about everything necessary to that crime. They'll take pictures of the room if it happened inside somewhere. Recently, when I had the 14-year-old, the 19-year-old, the 25-year-old, and the 20-year-old shot on the south side, it was in a house. So the guy who went in there with the camera, he was in there about 45 minutes or an hour because there was a lot to take care of. Okay, so you have that scene. Detectives come, they move through the scene. After wave upon wave of detectives may show up. So it may be 3 or 4 detectives, then they kind of swap out, some more come, they'll swap out, and another set of detectives come. And for you who are helping take care of the family, helping take care of that mom, whatever the case may be, that's important to know, because what's going to happen is they're going to ask that family, that mom, the same questions. Every set of detectives is going to ask them the same questions. Another thing that a detective is going to do is he's going to go door to door, knocking on doors. And if the lights are on in the church, he'll probably knock on the church too, because that's his job to find out. That lasts about 3 or 4 hours, because what happens after the detective leaves, then there's a telephone call made to body removal, generally by a service called Acme. One service just about handles all that. Now the scene is moved from a city situation to a county situation, in that the Cook County Medical Examiner or the morgue will take over. That body removal, once they call, they have 75 minutes to respond. So now, once everything has been done by the detectives, the police, everybody like that, body removal could still take an hour or two to show up. And so that mom, not going to leave until the last moment, generally speaking. And so you see the length of care, the length of attention, the length of attempting to lower the temperature of that scene, to help people, to pray with people, to just comfort people. Because I'll throw this in, because this is very important as we try to close for the day and get these tacos. I rarely pray out loud at a crime scene. And people are surprised at that. But isn't that what you do? Well, I do way much more than that. But the fact of the matter is, the reason why I'm praying in my spirit constantly. But to come up to a mom in the middle of their crime scene, Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you today. She's not hearing that. She's not hearing anything like that. And so, number one, you represent yourself as a person of God. You represent yourself as somebody who's there on behalf of the Father. Then they feel that. They feel that. Love, genuine love, they do feel that. It have to be a standoffish love. It may be a hug love. But in any case, that you exhibit the love of Christ at a scene like this, then that's one of the most beautiful things that can happen. And it takes some time and otherwise, but it's important that we as a church are out there. We as a church are recognizable. We as a church realize the mandate of Christ in order to do work like this at different levels. At the level of care, a level of caretaking that we do, whether it's that night, whether it's the next day, otherwise. Your church, you as a community stakeholder, you as a member of the church, be aware of what's going on in the neighborhood you serve. And if that neighborhood is a block, that neighborhood is a police district, that neighborhood is a ward, whatever the case may be, it's important that you're aware, you're going to your beat meetings, you know your CAPS people, so that you have a stake in what you call a stakeholder. A lot of times we see at these meetings, I'm the chairperson of the 6th District on the South Side, faith-based. And you'll be surprised, as a mom and pop church, as one of those small churches, they could never think about how they get in touch with the mayor or how they get in touch with the police commander. They couldn't even imagine that. But if you see some of them, or you're involved in something, and you all get in touch, you all get connected, then that starts to bring everybody up to another level. That's about all the time I have for now. You all are welcome to ask me questions. We have about 30 seconds of questions. No, if you all have any questions before we eat, otherwise, I'll be around for a while.